Days of Our Lives Friday, February 27th. The full breakdown. Owen Kent is back and Salem just accused the wrong man again. Last time in Salem chaos. Pure, beautiful, soap opera chaos. Stephanie Johnson vanished, and the town immediately needed someone to blame. Jeremy Horton, with his complicated history and his reputation that precedes him like a storm cloud, walked right into that blame like a man who never saw it coming. Her family reacted the way any terrified family would, emotionally, instinctively, and completely without the benefit of facts. Steve was in full patch mode. Kayla was furious. Alex Kyriakis, whose feelings for Stephanie have never exactly been simple, was barely keeping a lid on his rage. And Jeremy stood there, accused. Again? Because that is what Salem does to people with complicated pasts. It remembers everything except the truth. Meanwhile, somewhere outside of town, in a locked shed that Stephanie cannot get out, the real story was already beginning to write itself. And that story is 16 years old. It has a face. It has a name. Owen Kent. Spoiler 1: The Nightmare, The Shed, and the Psychology of Terror. Let's start with Stephanie, because honestly, she deserves the first conversation. She is lying in a shed, bound, alone, unable to get to the door. And her brain, her traumatized, terrified, desperately trying to cope brain conjures up a nightmare where Jeremy Horton is her kidnapper. Where Jeremy pulls a gun and shoots Alex right in front of her. Now here's where I need to stop and just appreciate what the writers are doing here. Because this is not lazy storytelling. This is actually kind of brilliant. Think about it from a psychological standpoint. Stephanie's subconscious cannot fully process the real threat. It cannot hold space for the fact that Owen Kent, the man who locked her in a morgue drawer 16 years ago, the man she presumably spent years recovering from, the original nightmare, is back. That is too much. That is too enormous and too terrifying for her mind to sit with directly. So what does trauma do? It deflects. It substitutes a known variable for an unknown horror. Jeremy Horton, complicated, present, someone she has current feelings and friction with, becomes the brain stand-in villain. Because processing Jeremy as a threat is somehow more manageable than accepting that Owen came back. That is trauma displacement. That is textbook. And Days of Our Lives is serving it up in a primetime drama format. And I am genuinely here for it. But let's be real for a second, the nightmare sequence also does something else. It tells us exactly where Stephanie's emotional priorities are right now. She dreams of Jeremy hurting Alex. Not just hurting her. Alex. The person she shoots up out of sleep screaming about is Alex Kyriakis. What does that tell you about where her heart actually is? Because I have my theories, and I think this dream sequence is the writers telegraphing something much bigger about her feelings for him than any conversation these two characters have had recently. Can you believe this? A nightmare scene is doing more emotional character work than 3 episodes of dialogue. That is soap opera storytelling at its finest. And then she wakes up. She is alone in the shed. The nightmare was a nightmare, but the danger is absolutely real. She starts working on the restraints. She gets to the door. The door is locked. This is the classic DOOL tension engine, the audience watching the character try to escape while we already know she cannot. We already know Owen is on his way back. We are sitting here knowing what she does not. And that dramatic irony is excruciating. And I mean that as a compliment. Spoiler 2: Owen Kent returns. Let's talk about this man's entire psychology. Wes Ramsey is back as Owen Kent. Full stop. Take a moment. For newer DOOL viewers who maybe came to the show in the last few years and are looking at each other going, who? Let me paint you a picture. 2009. Owen Kent was working as a gardener at the DeMera mansion. Already concerning. Already a red flag that I feel like not enough people flagged at the time. He became fixated on Stephanie Johnson to the point of kidnapping her and hiding her in a morgue drawer. Not a room. Not a basement. A morgue drawer. The psychological depravity of that specific choice has never left me, and I don't think it should leave you either. And now 16 years later he is back. Here is the question that genuinely keeps me up at night when I think about this storyline. What kind of person does that? What kind of internal world does a man live in where an obsession with a woman he held captive for a brief period of time becomes the organizing principle of his entire existence? 16 years. Stephanie built a whole life. She had relationships. She had a career. She loved people and lost people and grew and changed. And Owen apparently spent those 16 years as a man waiting, frozen in time around a fixation that the object of that fixation has long since moved past. That is not love. I want to be extremely clear about that. That is possession masquerading as love. That is the belief that a person belongs to you not because of connection or choice, but because you took them once and you have decided that act of taking was a form of ownership. It is chilling. And Wes Ramsey plays it so well because he never goes cartoonishly villainous. There is something disturbingly earnest about Owen, like he genuinely believes what he is doing is justified. That is scarier than a mustache-twirling bad guy. Way scarier. The fan theory I cannot stop thinking about. Okay, put the popcorn down. This is the part where we go off script a little. A theory has been circulating in the DOOL fan community, and I am going to be honest, I dismissed it at first. And then I kept thinking about it. And now I cannot stop. What if Owen did not just find Stephanie on his own? What if someone in Salem gave him a nudge? Information, maybe. Her location, her schedule, her connection to Alex Kyriakis and the Kyriakis family name. Because here is the thing about the Kyriakis family, they have enemies the way Salem has secrets, constantly, comprehensively, and often going back decades. Victor's legacy is not clean. The power transition happening within that family right now has people watching, calculating, and maneuvering. And what better way to destabilize Alex Kyriakis, to pull him off his game, to consume him emotionally, than to resurrect a nightmare from the past of the woman he loves? It is elegant. It is cruel. It is exactly the kind of long game chess move that the Demera playbook has always favored. Am I saying this is confirmed? Absolutely not. This is a theory. But I am saying that Days of Our Lives has a long, rich history of villains operating through proxies, and the timing of Owen's return is a little too convenient for me to fully accept as coincidence. You can fight me in the comments. I welcome it. Spoiler 3: the triple apology and why a team matters more than you think. Now, let's talk about Jeremy Horton getting his apology. Because this is the moment I want to sit with. Steve Johnson, Kayla Johnson, and Alex Kyriakis all apologized to Jeremy for pointing the finger at him. And I need you to understand that each of these 3 apologies carries a completely different weight. They are not the same apology delivered 3 times. They are 3 separate character moments that mean 3 completely different things. Steve's apology is the one that stings the most. And I say that as someone who loves Patch Johnson deeply. Because Steve is a professional. He is an ESA operative. His entire identity, the patch, the swagger, the reputation is built on the premise that he is smarter than the average person in the room. He reads people. He finds the truth. And he got this one spectacularly wrong. Not because he is a bad investigator, but because he is a father. And fathers, even legendary ones, lose their objectivity when their children are in danger. That is deeply human. And the apology, coming from Steve, means he is acknowledging that his love for Stephanie overrode his judgment. That is not a small thing for a man like Patch to admit. Kayla's apology hits differently because of the scene that precedes it. The spoilers tell us that Kayla goes to Marlena and vents. She calls Jeremy's actions despicable. She is furious, raw, barely holding it together. And Marlena, wise, measured, the emotional center of Salem for literally decades, does not validate the anger. She pushes back. She says she is skeptical. She essentially looks Kayla in the eye and says, slow down. Marlena Evans has been the moral compass of this show since the 1970s. When Marlena is skeptical, the show is telling you pay attention. And I genuinely love that it is Marlena who becomes the voice of reason here. Not a detective. Not an investigator. The psychiatrist who has spent her entire career reminding people that the truth is more complicated than the story we want to tell about it. Kayla listening to Marlena and changing her perspective. That is not weakness. That is growth. That is a legacy character being written with the intelligence and depth that she deserves. And then there is Alex. Alex's apology is the most emotionally tangled one in the bunch, and honestly, I think it is the most important, because Alex's anger at Jeremy was never really purely about Stephanie's safety. Let's be honest. It was personal. It was territorial. It was the specific, ugly flavor of fear that comes when you love someone and feel powerless to protect them, and you need somewhere to aim all of that energy. Jeremy became that target. And for Alex to look Jeremy in the face and say I was wrong, that requires him to also admit that his anger was driven by something messier and more personal than justice. That is character growth happening in real time. And Robert Scott Wilson plays those kinds of vulnerable moments extraordinarily well. Kayla and Alex apologizing to Jeremy simultaneously is the emotional centerpiece of this episode, and I want to make sure that does not get lost in the excitement over Owen's return. That scene is going to hit hard. Spoiler for Brady and Alex, the unlikely partnership that makes total sense. Brady Black and Alex Kyriakis are teaming up to search for Stephanie throughout Salem. And look, on paper, these two should not work together. Their histories are complicated. Their personalities are different. Brady carries a weight to him, a kind of weariness that comes from having survived more personal disasters than most people accumulate in a lifetime. Alex burns hot, moves fast, leads with his heart almost every time. But in a crisis, that combination might actually be exactly what is needed. Brady brings the experience. He has been in this exact flavor of Salem nightmare before: someone missing, time running out, the city becoming a maze. He knows how to operate under that kind of pressure without completely falling apart. Alex brings the urgency, the will, the refusal to stop. He is not going to let exhaustion or logic talk him out of following one more lead, checking one more location, asking one more question. They are also running parallel to Steve and Jada, who are out there working their own angle on the investigation. To search parties, to sets of eyes, and the dramatic clock ticking down because we know Owen is already heading back to that shed. The race is on, and Salem better move fast. Was the triple apology to Jeremy enough, or did Kayla, Steve, and Alex let themselves off the hook too easily? And do you think Owen came back on his own, or did someone in Salem help him find Stephanie? Drop your theory below. We are reading every single comment.